The wind rolled off Boston Harbor in cold waves, hard and mean, and Nausea Pierce pressed her back against a brick storefront that had long since gone dark. She tucked her 3-month-old son, Jonah, closer to her chest. The blanket she had wrapped around him was thin. Her coat was thinner. The night had teeth. It bit through everything. Jonah's lips looked too pale. His small fists no longer clenched and unclenched with restless energy. They stilled against her collarbone. Nausea knew the signs from library searches and the pamphlet a nurse had once folded into her hand. When a baby stops shivering, the cold has burrowed deep. She rubbed the back of his head with a thumb that could not feel itself anymore and whispered a steady rhythm into his tiny ear. Hold on for me. Christmas Eve brought lights to every window on the block. Strings of soft gold sparkled around door frames. Cheer sat inside, warm and well-fed, while the sidewalks turned to knives. Nausea had tried 3 shelters before the snow started, walking with Jonah tied to her with a scarf. Each place shook a head and pointed to a list. Each list had dates weeks away. She said thank you because there was nothing else to say, and kept walking. A bus labored up the hill, a city blue and white that looked out of place in the empty night. It should not have been running so late. Service had slowed to a crawl hours ago. The bus stopped at the corner, brakes sighing like a tired animal, and the door stayed open. Warm air spilled out and swirled against the wind. A figure climbed down from the driver's seat. A woman in a heavy navy parka, knit hat pulled low, gray hair tucking out at the temples. She scanned the sidewalk like a lighthouse scans water. Her gaze landed on Nausea. It stayed there. You all right? She called over the wind. Nausea opened her mouth and only a breath came out. She nodded, then shook her head. The woman crossed the street without waiting for an answer, sure-footed on black ice. I'm Ruth, she said, voice gentle and steady. Come on, honey. Let's get the little one out of this wind. She did not ask for proof. She did not flinch at the smell of old streets and cold fear. She took one of Nausea's bags in one hand and cupped her elbow with the other. Step up slow. That's it. Watch the last riser. The bus interior glowed with a soft yellow light. The seats near the front held a folded stack of clean fleece blankets, a basket of baby formula, a thermos, and paper cups with lids. There was a floral tote full of socks. There were hand warmers. A sign taped above the fare box read, in thick marker, warming loop. Pay with kindness. Ruth closed the door. The wind vanished like a curtain dropped at the end of a show. She took the blanket from Nausea's shoulders and replaced it with a heavy fleece. Then she peeled Jonah from his mother's coat, fast but careful, and tucked him inside another blanket warmed on the dashboard vent. He's not crying, Ruth said, listening, so we'll warm him slow. No hot water, just skin, breath, and time. She handed Nausea a paper cup. Steam rose. The smell of cinnamon hit first, then chamomile. Sip, little by little. Tell me if you feel dizzy. Nausea sipped. The tea was sweet in a way that reached the nerves. Her hands shook, sloshing the surface, and Ruth steadied the cup with her palm. How long have you been out in it? 2 months, Nausea said. It surprised her to hear the words. 2 months since the rent locked behind me. 2 months since a manager said they were sorry, but the schedule was full. 2 months of this. Where were you working? Soundboard tech at a music club down in Dorchester. Nights mostly. The owner sold the place. New folks brought in their own crew. She drew a breath and looked down at Jonah. Color crept back into his lips like sunrise. I kept telling myself it was temporary. Ruth nodded without judgment, as if Nausea had said she once kept houseplants and forgot to water them, and not that a life had come apart in public. The bus engine idled, steady and low, a heartbeat in steel. Your son's name? Jonah. You picked a brave name, Ruth said. Means dove, a bringer back. My abuela taught me that. Nausea watched the woman move through the space with the confidence of someone who had lived 2 lives and braided them together. Driver, nurse, host. She checked Jonah's hands, then his nose, then the nap of the blanket near his chest. What is this? Nausea asked. This bus. Ruth looked out at the empty street. Snow blew sideways. The city calls it Route H6, Harbor Loop. I call it my hot route. Last winter, I kept finding people at the late stops with nowhere to go. I got tired of telling them to wait on programs that move slow. So I started a warming loop on my third shift. We don't pick up fares this time of night. She nodded at the tote bag. And some of my regulars donate what they can. Socks, formula, a couple of my church ladies bake too much on purpose. You could get in trouble, Nausea said. Probably, Ruth said, and shrugged in a way that made the worry look small in the face of a simple truth. But some days you do the work in front of you. The radio on her console crackled. A dispatcher asked for a status check. Ruth picked up the microphone and answered with a calm, professional tone. Everything fine. Snow light at City Point. Visibility acceptable. Then she clicked off and smiled at Nausea as if they shared a secret. Where do you live? Ruth asked. Nausea swallowed. I don't know what to call it. I move. Tonight you don't, Ruth said. I'm headed to Eastie. Our community center keeps a little apartment over the gym for emergencies. It is not fancy. It is warm. It is safe. And there's a crib someone donated last week. You and Jonah can rest there for a few nights while we figure the next steps. Nausea wanted to say no out of habit. Pride learned hard will rise even when it has no shoes. Then Jonah made a soft sound, a small awake noise after hours of hurt, and she let the word go. Yes, she said, please. Ruth eased the bus into gear. They rolled past storefronts trimmed in wreaths and fairy lights, past a couple slipping and laughing on the corner, past a bar where a saxophone blew a line of blue through the frosted glass. Snow dusted the route markers like flour on bread. Tell me what you're good at, Ruth said, eyes on the road. I did a little of everything at the club, Nausea said. Ran the board for small acts, tuned the room when the big names came through, set up mics, patched old cables that should have been replaced in 2009. On good nights, I could make the air feel like velvet. Ruth looked impressed. We host events at the center, she said, but our sound is rude. Half the time the pastor shouts to make up for bad speakers. Maybe you can help us tune the place. We pay a little. Not much, more when we get grants in. Grants, Nausea repeated, as if the word were a shoreline she could see but not yet stand on. Don't worry about the money tonight, Ruth said. Tonight is just warm. They crossed the bridge with the skyline to their right, black water below, and strings of highway like lit thread behind. Nausea watched the city she had loved from backstage. She had learned the habits of its night, the way cooks smoked behind the diner on Atlantic, the way the bodega owner slipped a banana into the hand of a kid who always said he was not hungry, the way certain doors opened when you knew which ones to knock on. She had never learned how to ask for help. Ruth had not made her ask. Ruth had simply opened a door. At a red light, a small figure stepped out from a bus shelter and waved both arms, a teen in an oversized coat with no gloves. Ruth opened the door, handed him 2 pairs of socks and a hand warmer, and told him where to get soup. He called her Miss D and blew into his hands like a locomotive. The light changed. The bus moved. How long have you done this? Nausea asked. Ruth thought for a moment. Since the January, my sister went into the hospital, she said. We were both girls when our parents crossed from Puerto Rico. I stayed in Boston and learned every neighborhood. She moved to Florida and loved the heat like a cat. When she got sick, I kept thinking about all the nights life thins out. When people fall between lines someone else drew. I could not fix my sister's cells, but I could learn the city the way a nurse learns a pulse. I could keep watch. Nausea felt something loosen under her ribs. Not safety, not yet. Something like the idea of safety drawing near. They reached the community center in East Boston, a red brick building with a mural of kids and kites across one wall. Ruth parked the bus, set the brake, and turned to Nausea with the look of a woman who handed out assignments with the blankets. Here's how this works, Ruth said. We go inside, we feed you. We call my friend Alma, who runs the place, and she pretends to be annoyed I woke her, and then shows up with a giant bowl of arroz con gandules, because that is who she is. You shower. We put Jonah in a warm onesie that someone knit with love. You sleep, tomorrow we start paperwork. ID, WIC, Mass Health for the baby. We do not solve everything. We do the next right thing, over and over. Wait, The word slipped out before Nausea could stop it. It came out raw. Ruth smiled as if this were her favorite question. Because someone did it for me when I was 19 and carrying a duffel bag in an anger too big for my body. A bus driver saw me and said, sit. And then she drove me somewhere the night could not find me. I went back to school. I got my license to drive the big wheel. That woman died 5 years ago, but I have her seat now. It is a good seat from which to notice trouble and to steer. Inside, the community center was dark except for a single lamp left for late souls. Ruth found keys in a tin by the office door and led Nausea upstairs. The small apartment held a couch, a rug with bright triangles, a crib near a window, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of cinnamon from a baking class earlier that day. Ruth switched on a space heater and set it near the crib. She checked Jonah's color one more time. He breathed easy. His mouth shaped a dream. Nausea stood in the doorway, unsure of how to hold her own body now that danger had loosened its grip. You're safe, Ruth said. Say it out loud. I'm safe, Nausea whispered, and the words tasted strange and good. Ruth scribbled her number on a sticky note and pressed it onto the fridge. Call me if he fusses and you get scared. Call me if the heater blinks. Call me if you need to hear a voice that answers. Nausea looked at the note. It was a small square of fluorescent paper. It felt like a map. Ruth made it to the door and paused. One more thing, she said. You said you could make air feel like velvet. I believe you. Tomorrow bring that to my gym. Let's see if we can make a room feel like hope. The door clicked. Footsteps faded down the stairs. Somewhere below, keys turned, and the world outside kept snowing. Nausea wrapped Jonah in the knit onesie, kissed the top of his head, and sank onto the couch. She did not mean to close her eyes. Sleep took her like a tide. In the early morning before dawn, the wind rose again and rattled the windows. The apartment held its warmth. Nausea woke with a start and reached for Jonah. He lay on his back, lips pink, hands open. He looked like a boy who had never cried in the cold. She put a palm over his chest and felt the steady rise and fall. The night had not swallowed them. A bus had come instead. Snow had softened the city by morning. The alley below the community center reflected a pale winter light. In the apartment over the gym, the heater hummed like a low cello and warm air gathered in the corners. Nausea woke at the small sound of her son. Jonah stretched, made a milk face, and blinked up at her with clear eyes. His lips were pink. His breath was steady. She lay a hand over his chest and felt a slow rise and fall. Gratitude moved through her like heat. A key turned downstairs. Footsteps came up and paused at the landing. A knock that was soft and confident sounded on the door. Nausea opened it to find a woman with a red scarf and a serious expression. She carried a casserole dish under a striped towel. I am Alma, she said. I run this place and try not to let it run me. You must be Nausea. I talked to Ruth. We are glad you are here. The towel came off, and the small apartment filled with the smell of arroz con gandules. Alma moved with the energy of a person who expected to solve problems and usually did. She set the dish on the counter, checked the heater, checked the bathroom light, and checked the crib slats with a practiced hand. First we eat, she said. Then we do our calls. A clinic has a drop-in slot for the baby. A parish across the street has a clothing closet. The big work comes later. You will not do any of it alone. Nausea could have cried again. Instead, she ate and watched Jonah sleep between spoonfuls. Alma sat and poured them both water, then pulled a small notebook from her bag. She wrote a list with square letters. Here is today, Alma said. We keep it simple. Clinic for the baby, city office for an ID for you. I will make the calls. Ruth will drive. Tonight we have a rehearsal in the gym for a holiday program. If you feel up to it, I want you there. Ruth tells me you are a sound person. Our sound is a sad story. There was humor in Alma's voice. It cut through Nausea's fog and set something steady inside her chest. After the meal, Alma showed her the shower. Hot water ran over a tile floor worn by years of use. Nausea bathed with slow care. She washed her hair twice. She scrubbed behind her ears and under her nails. She wrapped Jonah in a soft towel and warmed him against her shoulder. She dressed in clean clothes from a donation shelf, black jeans that fit, a long-sleeved shirt the color of tea. Her reflection in the mirror looked like a person and not a problem. By 10, Ruth had returned in her navy parka with a backpack full of small things that mattered. Diapers, a knit cap, a bottle brush, and 2 pairs of thick socks. She placed a bright sticker sheet on the table for later. For him when he is old enough, Ruth said. Stars for the future. They drove to a clinic 2 stops away. A nurse with kind eyes named Dr. Patel listened to Jonah's small lungs and nodded with approval. He is lucky, Dr. Patel said. He is also strong. Warm him slowly on cold days. Feed him as often as he asks. If anything feels wrong, call us. We will answer. They took photos at the city office for Nazia's ID. She stood on the line where the clerk told her to stand and tried to put a life into a neutral expression. The card emerged warm from the machine. It had her name in it. It felt like a door key. Paper opens rooms, Alma said as they walked out. We will collect the papers one by one. Back at the center, the gym smelled like varnished floor and faint winter air. Folding chairs were stacked against one wall. Banners from past tournaments hung high under the beams. A portable stage sat at the far end. 2 speakers on thin stands flanked a plastic podium. A tangled rope of cables lay coiled like a sleeping snake. A volunteer named Luis stood over a mixer with his hands raised in surrender. Every knob is wrong, he said to Alma. If I touch it, it hisses. If I do not touch it, it also hisses. Nazia set Jonah in a front carrier and stepped toward the table. Her fingers felt the old confidence return. The way a musician's hands return to a beloved instrument. She traced the cables from microphone to mixer to amplifier to speaker. She replaced one patch. She taped a frayed connector. She tilted a speaker to avoid bouncing sound off a hard wall. She brought up the master volume with the care of a nurse lifting a pulse. A voice came through clear. Check 1, she said. Check 2. The room seemed to change shape. The echo softened. The air turned kind. Ruth leaned on a bleacher, listening with a proud, quiet smile. Alma called across the floor. What do I owe you for this miracle? It is not a miracle, Nazia said. It is signal flow. Then you will teach me signal flow, Alma said. I want us to keep this sound when you are not in the room. That night, the holiday rehearsal drew a crowd. Choir kids with hats still on their heads filed in with bright cheeks. Their director, a man named Mr. Paul, lined them up by height. There was a small brass trio from the high school, 2 teachers who would read from a borrowed script, and a table of elders who would hand out cocoa at the end. A woman from the neighborhood theater carried a crate of props. She set a wooden star on the stage and then found a seat near the sound table. She watched with interest. The first run started with squeals and false starts. The soprano section sang and no one could hear them. The readers leaned too far from the microphones. The brass trio blew too hot for the small room. Nazia moved among them with calm hands and a clear voice. She raised a stand here. She taped on a line there. She adjusted the gain and set warm levels. She showed a young girl how to hold the microphone steady. She asked the brass to play softer and face the back wall for one verse. Slowly, order replaced chaos. The gym felt like a room that could hold a story. At a break, the woman from the theater approached. She had a winter coat the color of fog and a notebook filled with notes. She introduced herself as Theo Rios. I run tech for Harbor Stage, Theo said. We have a residency program for early career engineers. We bring folks in for a season and teach the house. Someone called out for the week between Christmas and New Year. Can you sub for a few nights here and there? Pay is honest. Crew is kind. The job is to make a small room sound like a big dream. Nazia inhaled and felt the world tilt toward a future she had not dared put into words. She looked at Alma. Alma nodded once as if this were the most natural turn in the world. Yes, Nazia said. I can do that. Theo handed her a card. It was simple and white. Harbor Stage, Director of Sound. A number and an email. No flourish. I saw the way you moved in the room, Theo said. You listen before you touch anything. That is the job. They ran the program again. It went clean. After the final note, the room held a gentle quiet that people did not rush to fill. It was the kind of quiet that follows beauty. Then the elders started pouring cocoa and the gym became a happy noise. At a table near the stage, Ruth sat with Alma and watched Nausea coil cables into neat circles. Jonah slept against his mother's chest. Theo spoke to Mr. Paul about the next rehearsal. Luis laughed at something an elder said about being young once and sneaking into dances at the armory. "This is what I want for her," Ruth said to Alma. "A room where she is needed and paid. A room that gets bigger because she is in it." Alma nodded. "She will build her own rooms. You can see it." When the gym had cleared, Nausea walked the empty floor one more time. She checked the power strips. She checked the stage edge. She checked that nothing wobbled. She did it with the care of a person who had been unsteady and wanted other people to feel steady now. Back in the apartment, she laid Jonah in the crib and watched him fall to sleep. She set Theo's card on the counter next to the sticky note with Ruth's number. She touched both with the tips of her fingers. Two small rectangles. Two directions out of winter. Her phone, a cheap model that held a charge like a stubborn mule, buzzed with a text from Alma. It read, "You did good today. Tomorrow we finish the paperwork and eat leftover rice." There was a second line. It read, "You belong in this building as long as you need." Nausea stood at the window. The city lights glittered on the thin snow. She thought of all the rooms she had worked from the shadows. She thought of all the doors she had never knocked on. She thought of a bus that opened its doors to the night, and a driver who called the third shift the hot route, and a director who called a sub a start. She said the word safe again. It felt less strange in her mouth. She added another word, home. It did not startle her to hear it. Downstairs, the gym settled. Heat ticked through the old pipes. Somewhere on the block, a church bell chimed the hour. Nausea closed her eyes and saw a future like a dim stage before the lights come up. The cues were marked. The audience waited. Sound check had gone well. When sleep came, it was deep and kind. The wind eased for 2 days as if the harbor had paused to breathe. In that calm, Nausea began. She wheeled Jonah's stroller along Meridian Street toward the train, a backpack slung over her shoulder, a small toolkit inside. Ruth walked with them to the corner, hands in her parka, eyes on every curb cut and patch of ice. "You call if anything gets weird," Ruth said. "First night at a new house can feel like walking into a movie mid-scene. You will catch up." "I will," Nausea said. She meant it. Theo had texted that morning. Harbor Stage needed her by 5. Crew call at 4:30. Casual dress. Warm layers. The theater stood inside an old shipfitter's hall near the docks, brick and steel, and a sign that glowed blue when the sun fell. Inside, the lobby held a small concession stand and a mural of waves. The main room had good bones. Seats climbed in a soft rake. The ceiling hung low enough to hold sound and high enough to breathe. The board sat in a booth at the back with a view that made you think in big shapes. Theo met her at the door. Faded sweatshirt, sharp eyes, a grin that suggested quick solutions. "You are early," Theo said. "Good. Tonight is a singer-songwriter with a band that thinks they are a whisper but play like a storm. We love them anyway. House opens at 6:30, show at 7. Let me show you the guts." They walked the space. Theo named the rig. 12 channels on a compact digital board. 2 wedges, no subs. A simple patch. "We do not pretend to be an arena," Theo said. "We make intimacy feel rich. You will like the room once you hear it." Backstage, a corner had been made into a family nook. A donated playmat, a thrifted rocker, a little shelf with board books. A note taped to the wall read, "Babies are crew too." Nausea laughed out loud. Relief rose like warmth. Alma arrived 10 minutes later with Jonah on her hip and a bag of bottles. "We will do the 6 to 8 window," Alma said. "Then Ruth will tag in if the show runs late, which it will because art has no respect for bedtime." Theo ran the band through line check. Kick, snare hat, bass in, guitar 2, vocal 1. Nausea rode the faders with a light touch. She listened to the room first. She nudged a frequency down when the guitar rang too hard. She warmed the vocal just enough that the consonants kissed the front row and did not pierce. She asked the drummer to switch to brushes on the ballad. He frowned, tried it, and smiled. "You hear like my grandmother," he said. "She could tell when the soup needed a half leaf of basil." "That is the goal," Nausea said. "Grandmother ears." The house filled with neighbors and fishermen and teachers who came after long days. Folks shook snow from their hats and held paper cups with something hot inside. The lights fell to a soft blue wash. The singer stepped to the mic. The first note unfurled like silk. Jonah slept through the first song in Alma's arms. His breath matched the tempo of a gentle waltz. Alma swayed in the dark aisle and hummed harmony under her breath. In the booth, Theo nodded at nausea after the second tune. The mix sat down in the room like a guest who knew where to put their coat. Halfway through the first set, a gust punched the building. It hit the old power lines outside with a sound like a snapped branch. The house went black. The board died. The stage lights cut. The heat clicked off. For a heartbeat, the theater became a deep sea. Then human sounds rose. A child gasped. An older couple whispered. Someone laughed, small and brave. A phone flashlight blinked on. Then another. Then 100. The room filled with tiny circles of light, unsteady and warm. Theo moved fast toward the breaker room. 10 minutes if it is the panel, she called. Longer if the line is down. The singer stood at center stage in the dark. His hand found the mic stand. He looked toward the booth where the board sat asleep and then looked out at the sea of small lights. His voice came steady and soft. "We can do this without wires," he said. "If you can listen close, we can keep going." He took 2 steps forward and sat on the stage edge. The guitar player followed and eased into a new tuning by ear. The drummer set the sticks on the floor and picked up a tambourine. The crowd quieted as if a hand had turned down the city. Nausea's chest went tight, not in fear, but in recognition. This was the kind of moment live rooms give as a gift when you do not force them. Alma shifted Jonah to her other arm and settled beside a woman from the seafood market. Ruth, who had slipped in at the back after her route, set her phone light toward the stage and held it high. Thea worked a flashlight down the hallway and vanished through a door with a clatter and a curse that sounded like a prayer. Nausea moved on instinct. She left the booth and went to the lip of the stage. She looked at the band and pointed toward the center. She touched her ear and made it a small circle with her finger, a cue to lean in and listen. She lifted her palm to the room and lowered it slowly, asking for less breath, less whisper, less cough. She cued the drummer with 2 fingers. Soft, then softer. The singer nodded. The room obeyed. The song they chose had no chorus anybody knew. It built on a line you could walk. The singer's voice held a crack that made the words feel true. A verse about a dark harbor. A verse about a kitchen light left on. A verse about a door opening when you thought every door was closed. The phone lights shook and steadied with hands. Faces looked up, open and present. Theo returned 13 minutes later with her face slicked with sweat and a streak of dust on her cheek. "Transformer outside," she told Nausea. "The city says an hour." She looked at the stage and laughed in quiet wonder. So we lean into the candle show. The band played by human wattage. People in the cheap seats came close and stood along the aisles. The singer told a story about his father teaching him to hear a song before it existed. The drummer kept time on his knee when the tambourine rattled too loud. The guitar used an old trick with a phone app tuner and a good ear to stay true. When the set ended, the applause felt like rain on a tin roof. It went on until the singer put a hand to his heart and dipped his head. He said they would take 10 and be back with something softer still. In the lobby, a reporter from a neighborhood paper scribbled notes and asked Theo for a quote. "The power cut," Theo said, and the room turned on. She pointed at Nausea. "Our sub made the whole thing breathe. Put her name in your story. Nausea Pierce, Pearc." The second set began with the singer at the piano, unamplified, voice alone. Friends held phones around the keys to make a small constellation. The audience sang harmony on a song they did not fully know. People learned together in real time. At the back, Ruth closed her eyes and let the sound wash. Alma rocked Jonah and felt his small hand open and close against her shoulder. Nausea stood at the edge of the stage and guarded the space like a lighthouse guards a channel. Outside, utility trucks arrived. Workers hauled ladders and shouted to one another over the wind. At the last note of the night, the lights blinked back with a hum. Heat pushed into the vents. The board booted. The room cheered again, Not because electricity had returned, but because they had not needed it. Backstage, Theo hugged Nausea with zero hesitation. You were calm, Theo said. You made the human mix. That is harder than the board. It felt like the gym, Nausea said. Just closer. The band handed her a folded envelope with a tip. Because you saved our favorite gig, the drummer said. He winked. And because your grandmother ears are right. Ruth took Jonah for the walk home so Alma could lock the center. On the sidewalk, the reporter caught up to Nausea and asked her name again. He asked about the warming loop on the bus. Ruth answered that one. She did not make herself the hero. She named the people who had kept her bus stocked. She named Alma. She named the elders who boiled cocoa. She named the kid who shoveled the center steps for $5 and a sandwich. She named the choir. The next morning, the neighborhood paper ran a photo on the front. 100 phone lights like stars over a stage. The headline read, "When the power went out, the crowd turned on." A second line sat smaller beneath. Community bus drivers, warming loop, inspires theater to keep doors open. Late. By noon, a box of new socks arrived at the center from a hardware store 3 blocks away. An envelope came with it. A note inside said, "For the hot route, keep rolling." Nausea read the paper at the kitchen counter in the apartment over the gym. She traced the curve of a phone light in the photo with her finger and laughed. Then she cried. She cried quietly, the good kind, the kind that drains old fear and makes room for the next thing. Theo texted at 2. The residency spot had opened for winter. It was not a favor. It was a room. It lasted 3 months with a small stipend and a metro pass. It came with workshops and a mentor. It came with a promise to put her name on posters when she mixed. It came with an expectation. Show up, learn, share. Nausea wrote back one word, yes. She looked over at Jonah, asleep in a patch of sun on the couch. She sat beside him and let her hand rest on his back. The apartment hummed. The gym creaked. Down on the street, the city kept moving. Somewhere a bus door folded open to the cold. Somewhere a driver said, sit. Somewhere a hand held up a light. Winter did not leave Boston so much as loosen its grip. The sidewalk stayed slick in the shade, but the sun lasted a little longer each afternoon. In that slow thaw, Nausea stepped into the residency at Harbor Stage. She kept her toolkit in a zippered pouch and Jonah's schedule in her head like a second board. A dozen tiny cues that told her when to warm a bottle, when to rock, when to breathe. On her first official day, Theo handed her a ring of keys and a white binder labeled House Brain. You will not need all of this, Theo said, tapping the binder. Until the night everything breaks. Read anyway. Nausea read. She learned the peculiar hum that meant Channel 7 needed a new cable. She learned which breaker would trip on humid days. She learned the point in the balcony where a feedback ghost liked to live, and the movement, half a step left, one finger on the fader, that sent it away. She also learned something she had not expected. People wanted to help her succeed. The lighting lead, a woman named Cass, showed Nausea how to listen to a fixture before it blew a lamp. The box office manager saved her a seat near the space heater on bitter mornings. The janitor tucked a pack of AA batteries in the booth with a note that read, for the night when the clicker dies and the crowd is full of hope. Alma kept the apartment over the gym running like a small ship. Ruth stocked the warming loop with new socks every Thursday. Jonah grew. He tracked the stage lights with solemn eyes when Nausea carried him through afternoon tech. He learned to laugh at the sound of a harp gliss. He fell asleep fastest to the low rumble of a bass amp warming up, a comfort his mother understood like a secret handshake. On a Monday in February, the neighborhood paper ran a follow-up to the Phone Light concert. Someone had snapped a photo of Nausea in the booth, headphones around her neck, attention on the stage. The caption named her. It also named the bus. The article made its way through the city like a hand-to-hand gift. By Wednesday afternoon, Nausea's old phone buzzed with an email she did not expect. Subject, saw you in the paper. Can we talk? From Malik Pierce. She stared at the name until the screen dimmed. Her older brother had not called when Jonah was born. He had not answered when the locks changed. He had not written when she sent a long message months ago that ended with, I'm tired of being angry and I still love you. Now his name fit on one line like a headline. She pressed open. I know I fell out on you. Work got busy. I made it an excuse. I'm sorry. If you'll see me, I'll come to you. She didn't answer right away. She printed the email and slid it under the magnet shaped like a lighthouse on the apartment fridge. Then she called Ruth. I want to say yes, Nausea said, but I don't want to storm in the room I just learned to breathe in. Then we make a different room, Ruth said. Neutral ground, witnesses who love you. Come to the gym while we're open. If he is decent, he will show up kind. If he is not, we will walk him out and send him with a sandwich because my conscience is loud. They chose Thursday at 3, between the seniors' chair yoga and the after-school program. The gym smelled like clean floor and orange slices. Alma set water on the table and positioned chairs like a counselor who had done this before. Malik arrived on time in a winter coat too thin for the season. He looked older, not from years, but from weight he had finally decided to carry. His eyes landed on Jonah first. They went soft. He took off his hat and held it in his hands. I didn't show up, Malik said. He did not sit. I thought if I stayed away long enough, the mess would pass and we could talk like normal again. That was cowardice dressed as patience. Alma nodded once, granting him the point. Nausea watched his mouth form the apology she had wanted for a year and felt a calm she had not expected. Jonah made a small sound and reached toward Malik's hat. Malik smiled, a real thing. He held the hat close enough for Jonah to take it, then let him. The hat fell. Jonah crowed. Ruth laughed out loud at the small holy, then sobered. Words are the beginning, Ruth said to Malik. We are fond of actions here. I brought the first ones, Malik said. He pulled an envelope from his coat and set it on the table. It's not much. It's what I can give without breaking my rent. It's for diapers or nothing or whatever. It's also a standing promise. On Tuesdays and Fridays, I'm off by 5. I can sit with him while you work. I used to be good at building block towers. Paper opens rooms, Alma murmured, and babysitting opens time. Nausea looked at her brother. He did not push. He did not perform. He stood with his hatless head bowed a little and waited like a person willing to be told no. She felt her decision arrive like a downbeat she knew to catch. Okay, she said. We try. Here are my rules. She said them clearly. No surprises, no disappearing, no showing up with opinions, and no labor. We can fight, we cannot quit. Malik nodded and met each rule with a quiet yes. He came Friday at 5 with a bag of wooden blocks he had bought secondhand and a pack of wipes. He got on the rug and made a tall tower. Jonah slapped it and squealed when it fell. They rebuilt. They knocked it down again. Nausea left for the theater with gratitude blooming in her chest in a slow, steady way. That night, Harbor Stage hosted a live storytelling show with 6 people and 1 microphone. The room needed softness, not spectacle. Nausea set the mic so each reader could stand without twisting. She ran a cable to a handheld recorder, hit record, and watched red numbers climb. Halfway through the show, a woman told a story about learning to swim at 40. Her voice shook and then settled. When she finished, the audience breathed out like water leaving a beach. After the show, the woman found Nausea in the booth. No one has ever made me sound like myself, she said, voice low with relief. I listened from the back and thought, it's me, but steadier. She put a hand over her own heart. Thank you. Nausea walked home through cold, clear air. She saw her breath and thought of her life like steam in winter. Visible now, proof of warmth inside. The next week, a different kind of theater happened in the gym. A city inspector visited the warming loop and the apartment over the gym. He had a checklist and clean boots. He frowned at the space heater near the crib and the extension cord that ran under a rug. I admire your intentions, he told Alma, but liability is not a poem. If something happens, the city will come with a list of fines in a headline you do not want. Alma's jaw set. So help us write this right. Tell us what to change. The inspector looked surprised, as if he expected a fight. He handed over a long page of corrections, new smoke detectors, hardwired carbon monoxide alarms, a different type of space heater, a safety gate at the top of the stairs. He tapped a line at the bottom. And you need a formal agreement with the city, a pilot designation. Otherwise, this is still goodwill with risk. Then we ask for the pilot, Ruth said, already fishing her phone from her pocket. We bring people who can tell the truth in a microphone. They set the meeting for a Monday night in March at City Hall Annex, Visto. Nausea brought the portable PA from the theater with Theo's blessing. She set it in the council chamber, where public comment usually sounded like a mutter in a tin can. She walked the room with a clap, listening for slapback, then angled the speakers to kiss the corners and not the mics. When the meeting began, voices rose clear and human. A teacher spoke. A nurse spoke. A man who slept under a bridge the previous winter spoke with a voice like a worn violin. Alma asked the city to bless what already existed. A warm bus that looped through dark blocks and a legal door that opened when lists were too long. Nausea did not speak until the chair asked if anyone else wanted the mic. She stepped up with Jonah on her hip. She did not tell the whole history. She told one night. I was a sound tech who lost a tree in a lease, she said. On a cold evening, a bus opened and a driver said, sit. That opened everything else. If we make a rule here tonight, let it be one that keeps doors open. In the back, the inspector with the clean boots nodded once and wrote something on his clipboard that was not a citation. The council voted to create a pilot. They called it the Harbor Nights Partnership. The city would help hardwire the apartment over the gym. The transportation department would authorize warming loops on specific routes. Grants would cover heaters that did not set off alarms and training that taught drivers when to stay and when to call for more help. It was a beginning, not a headline, and it was enough. Afterward, Ruth hugged Nausea so hard the keys on the ring between them chimed, a little music of metal and pride. Alma cried once and then set dates. Theo texted from the theater. Heard you gave City Hall a mix that sounded like truth. Save me a seat at the first official loop. Back at the apartment, Nausea put Jonah in the crib and stood at the window. Outside, the streetlights made halos in a light snow. The gym below sat quiet and sure. The binder labeled Housebrain lay open on the table to a page she had studied the week before. In the margin, in her own hand, she had written a small note. Make the room bigger, then invite everyone in. She turned off the lamp and let the city hum hold the rest. Spring came fast, like a curtain rising. The harbor shrugged off its gray. Gulls wrote loose cursive above the docks. In the apartment over the gym, morning light slid across the floor, and Jonah practiced standing with both hands on a chair. He laughed at gravity as if it were a joke he now understood. The city's pilot had turned into work with dates and invoices and training sessions that smelled like coffee and new binders. Drivers learned how to spot danger that looked quiet. Volunteers learned how to serve soup like respect. Electricians threaded safe lines through old walls. The apartment over the gym received its new alarms and its official paper, framed on the stairwell where everyone could see. Harbor Nights Partnership, approved. At Harbor Stage, Nausea's residency moved from learning to leading. Theo handed her more nights and bigger shows. When a touring poet arrived with a hard drive full of last-minute cues, Nausea met panic with a chair, a water bottle, and an extra 10 minutes that she carved by rearranging what seemed unmovable. You're not just mixing sound, Theo told her after a sold-out Friday. You're mixing people, that's rarer. Malik showed up as promised. On Tuesdays and Fridays at 5, he arrived with block ideas and fresh wipes. He learned Jonah's sleepy signs and the trick with the blue blanket and that always worked. He kept a small ledger in his phone, diapers, snacks, a bag of hand-me-down books, and sent Nausea a snapshot of every receipt. Trust grew one screenshot at a time. Come hear me mix next month, she told him one night, pinning a flyer to the fridge. We're doing Harbor Night Live. It's a fundraiser for the partnership. Choir, poets, a brass line from the high school, 3 bands, and a surprise guest. What's the surprise? Malik asked. If I tell you, it's a schedule, Nausea said. Come and be surprised. The city treated the event like a birthday. Alma booked the gym for spillover and volunteers. Ruth mapped a shuttle loop in a neat looped script. Community center, Harbor Stage, Annex lot, so no one had to choose between tickets and parking. Theo designed a stage plot that looked like a puzzle and fit together when you breathe right. The elders baked, the brass line polished. The choir learned a song that rose like dawn. On the morning of the show, a storm brewed out past the islands and hurried toward land. Forecasts said wind, then more wind, then secure loose items. Theo walked the roof line with the building manager and said fine, then finer. We're good, she told Nazia, though her eyes did the math of contingencies. By late afternoon, the first drops hit the windows. Doors opened at 6. People arrived in slickers that shone under the lobby lights. Guests stacked umbrellas like oars near the concession stand and laughed in the happy way of crowds that have decided together to ignore weather they cannot change. Nausea did a last walk of the room, cable ends snug, tape corners flat, mics live and waiting. The show began with the brass line marching up the aisle, horns bright, rain shushing against the roof like 1,000 hands. The choir followed, their voices filling the room with something that sounded like a harbor at sunrise. A poet spoke about long nights on short money and how a hand on your elbow can feel like a door. Halfway through the first act, the wind rose. The roof sighed and held. The lights flickered once, like a wink, and went steady. Nazia felt the room lean into her hands. She rode the faders like rains. When the break came, people spilled into the lobby for cocoa and stories. Malik stood with Jonah on his hip, swaying to the brass line's rehearsal riff. Ruth refolded a stack of ponchos near the exit and told a kid in a soaked hoodie about the warming loop like a favorite fairy tale. Alma checked the volunteer list and made a new column on a clipboard labeled Extra. That storm is going to swipe, Theo said quietly to Nazia, eyes on the weather radar spinning on her phone. If the grid wobbles, we pivot like last winter. Candle show if we need it. We'll hold, Nazia said, and if not, we'll sing louder. Act 2 opened with the high school strings joining the choir. Bow hair glowed under the lights. The room listened like a held breath. Then the surprise guest walked out. A local legend who had once sung backup on records that smelled like vinyl in summer. The crowd stood all at once, the kind of standing that is also a thank you. She smiled like someone who had lived long enough to stop pretending she didn't love applause. She looked at Nazia across the room, touched 2 fingers to her temple in a salute-only text notice, and began. The first song carried easy. The second bloomed. On the third, the storm punched the grid. Everything went dark. No scream, just that sharp, collective inhale. And then the sea of phone lights again, but bigger this time. Rows and rows of small constellations rising from hands that remembered what to do. Nazia did not leave the board. She lifted her left hand high with a slow, downward sweep, and the room understood. Soften. She raised her right hand toward the stage and pointed 3 times, 1, 2, 3, to the singer, then the strings, then the choir. She put a closed fist to her heart, a sign for you carry it. The legend stepped to the lip of the stage, shook out her hands, and started a hymn so old it didn't belong to any one place. The choir found her on the second line. The strings laid a quiet floor under the melody. The audience sang harmony with the storm. Theo and the building manager sprinted toward the alley panel. Ruth checked the lobby doors and stationed 2 volunteers to hold them steady in case of gusts. Alma whispered to the elders, who lit battery candles and passed them down rows with the same ceremony they brought to communion. Malik moved to the aisle, ready to help anyone who needed a steady arm in the dim. The hymn ended, and the legend turned to Nazia with a question in her eyes. Nazia lifted 2 fingers, 2 more, then the choir alone. The singer nodded and spoke into the darkness as if it were a friend. When wires go quiet, she said, we hear the bones of a room. She taught the crowd a call and response she learned as a child, a simple line with room for everyone's voice. The roof boomed once in outrage. The walls hummed agreement. People sang anyway. Outside, the grid crews worked under buckets of rain and arcs of light. Harbor Stage stood like a ship moored hard. In the gym, the overflow audience, kids, elders, latecomers, watched a live stream on a projector until the internet blinked too, and then Alma said fine and led them in the same call and response with a djembe she pulled from a closet. The building kept its promises, warm, safe, together. Power returned like a breath you didn't realize you'd been holding. Lights rose to half as if someone remembered dimmer etiquette. The board woke, green LEDs marching like soldiers back to post. The crowd cheered, then laughed at themselves for cheering a utility. The legend looked at Nazia again. Nazia gave a small, theatrical bow from the booth, then rolled them into the finale queue as if that had been the plan all along. They closed with the harbor song the choir had learned, the one that rises like dawn. The final chord hung and softened. The room let silence sit. Then applause like rain, but warm this time, not cold, rolling through the seats and up the walls. After the show, the lobby felt like a neighborhood kitchen. People hugged people they had only just met. Ruth's shuttle loop ferried elders to the annex lot and back without a hitch. Volunteers gathered wet umbrellas for a late-night dry. Jonah fell asleep on Malik's shoulder with his mouth open and his hair damp from too many adoring hands. In the green room, the legend found Nazia packing up the handhelds. "You kept that room," she said, "not by pushing sound, but by holding people." "It was everyone," Nazia said, and meant it. "We practiced being a community all year. Tonight we just did it loud." Theo leaned in the doorway, soaked hair slicked to her forehead, grin bright enough to count as another light source. "Director of Sound," she said to Nazia, "has a new ring to it, doesn't it?" "A title?" Nazia asked, startled. "A job," Theo replied. "Residency ends next week. Stay. We can pay you right. Program the calendar. Mentor the next use." She gestured toward the stage, which still felt warm. "Say yes." Nazia thought of the apartment over the gym and the framed paper on the stairwell. She thought of Ruth's hands on a steering wheel, of Alma's pens lining up for new lists. She thought of Malik's ledger and Jonas's laugh and 100 phone lights rising in a storm. She felt the yes before she said it. Yes. They walked out to the lobby where the last of the crowd drifted into wet night and streetlight halos. The rain slowed. The storm unknotted itself above the islands and moved on. Later in the apartment, Nazia set Jonah in his crib and stood at the window while the city exhaled. She opened the kitchen drawer and laid 3 things on the counter. The framed pilot approval Alma had given her a duplicate of, the harbor stage offer letter Theo emailed at midnight, and a photo from the paper of a room lit by phones. She touched each with the tip of one finger. "Safe," she said softly, then added the newer word, "home." Then another, "ours." Downstairs, the gym pipes ticked with heat. On a street 2 blocks over, a driver finished her loop and parked a city bus with a hand on its dash like thanks. In the morning, there would be more work. There would be grant reports and mic checklists and diapers and copy paper and somebody's favorite song cue to fix. Tonight there was quiet in the sense of a city choosing to keep its doors open. Nazia turned off the lamp and let darkness be friendly. The room kept its promise. She had helped teach it how.